everybody. This is William del Pilar, and this is Fired Up, your Friday evening source for some conservative talk. Ironically, it is supposed to be our fellow panelist, our fellow friend, my co-host, Mr. G. Manghani, who is supposed to be hosting this week's show. But right now, he is having some computer problems. And to be quite frank, there's just too much happening with Trump's tariffs and all the doomsayers, the naysayers, those with TDS, those willing to lie. There's a thought out plan for what is happening with Trump's tariffs. And you can thank the genius of Scott Bessent. We are going to talk about Scott Bessent. We're going to talk about the up and downs of the market. We're going to talk about the strategy and as well as what's happened and the accusations of insider trading that Democrats and mainstream media and once again TDSers are screaming and hollering about. And that includes the lies you're hearing about Smoot-Hawley. Oh my God. I saw that last week with my notes and I immediately thought that, damn, that's no big deal. You know, based on when I saw the dates, I'm like, this doesn't track. Then it became an issue for some people. And what happens is you get the TDSers, you get the mainstream media, you get the Democrats. They don't look at the big picture because they don't want you to see the big picture. What they want you to do is to focus in on, well, look at the math. Look at the math for how he's doing this in terms of figuring out his tariffs. I got to be honest, people, that doesn't really matter, to be quite frank. What matters is he put tariffs on. So let's move with that story. But instead, they want to sit there and denigrate Trump. I have issues, even with friends. I'm like, y'all think you're smarter than Trump. I'm like, where's your billions? You know, you're highly educated. Some of my friends have gone to Ivy League universities. I find it ironic when I worked in the nonprofit sector and I had friends who went to Ivy League universities and they're earning $25,000 at the time. And I'm like, oh my God, how many decades is it going to get the pay off that debt? But I digress. The point is people, because of how Trump talks, of how he looks at his audience, meaning we, the people, and communicates with us, people think they're smarter than him. And to be truthful, they're not, you know, because my take is simple. Success is judged many ways, and we all want to be able to provide for our families. So success, one factor of success, not happiness, but success is an ounce of in terms of how well you do in your career. And I'm like, well, he went from, I don't care if it was 3 million, 10 million, or hell, even 100 million he was given. He's worth 5 billion now. You don't do that because you're an idiot. So I think how he talks, how he delivers, people use that against him. But he's got the ace in the hole, Scott Bessent. And you are going to be fascinated at this guy's background. And with that, let me bring on my co-host, see if he's jamming with us tonight. G, how you doing? Oh, there you go, brother. You sound great.
Sound all right? All right.
Yes. To the audience, G was in as he talked hell. And then the worst nightmare that happens when you're in a time crunch. Man, my computer's stuck in
right.
reboot.
8-minute reboot, but it fixed the problem.
I've gone through that when G's experienced it. G had to grab hold of, had to host the reigns not once but 2 weeks in a row. Because before I go on, I'm like, let me do a clean reboot. And that was the worst thing to do because there was something conflicting screwing up my whole computer. And I fixed it, same computer. So G, I've just been giving the intro here in terms of how President Trump is what he's going through with his week one, the stock market going up and down, the genius of Scott Bessent we're going to talk about. But gee, let me get this out of the way. So as always, make sure you like and share this podcast once we're done. But more importantly, make sure you bookmark grumblingsmedia.com. Bookmark grumblingsmedia.com. That's our website. That's where you'll find everything we have, from our articles to our podcasts to my beautiful mug all over, well, not all over, but a couple spots. And you're probably listening to us via Rumble or YouTube or Apple, Spotify, or Pandora. And that is under the handle Grumblings Media, for those of you not aware. So once again, Rumble, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Pandora, Grumblings Media. So G, I have to give us props. I really do. G and I went through a 2.5 hour podcast, and that's on me. I get very anal. There was a great podcast. If you haven't seen it, Joe Rogan and Dave Smith tried to take out Douglas Murray with their. Dave Smith is in an anti-Semitic anti-Semite, but he hates Israel, and that's obvious. And it was a good back and forth debate. And the reason I bring them up is they're both anal too. They both research. They understand the bigger picture. Douglas Murray does, at least. And I think, as somebody born and raised in a third world country, as an American citizen, I do, and I've traveled to 30 some odd countries, I do see the bigger picture. I do understand it. And I've come to realize not everybody sees that. So I feel part of my responsibility as I got older is to make sure people understood the situation. And G and I broke it down. We broke it down from what to expect, from Trump's strategy, from what Scott Bessent. We didn't take a talking point and we focus on that talking point. We didn't take the academic view where people who read a book and they have all the answers. My God, if we could only read a book, G, and we'd have all the answers, all of us would be living in mansions and rich, and we wouldn't care about tariffs or anything of the sort. So those are the worst people, are the ones who read a book and they know everything. And that's fine. You know, like Douglas Murray threw it on Dave Smith. You never gone to Israel, and you're assuming the blockade means this, means that. Now, that's fine that Dave Smith hasn't gone, but Douglas Murray has gone. So he has that extra layer of analysis, of depth, of legitimacy. And that's what he was trying to. He didn't do it very well, trying to tell Dave Smith. And Dave Smith doesn't want to hear none of it. Why? Because the guy hasn't traveled outside of New York, except to a comedy club and you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I look at it from that perspective, and I think we predicted a lot of things. We predicted the markets up and down, and we're going to talk about this topic today, and then we're going to talk about the insider accusations, and then time permitting, we're going to get into our hot take. So I don't want to do 2.5 hours tonight, but I do want to go through all this so you understand. G, before we get going, what is your take of the first week overall in terms of not from what happened, but the reaction from the average Joe on social media to the experts on the Sunday talk shows to the analysis on social media by so-called experts? What was your take overall?
Well, obviously, you said if you could read a book and get rich, that we would all do it. And there's one book that I think everyone could read and understand what's going on. And that's The Art of the Deal. And I saw on X, President Xi, you know, there was a meme with him reading the book, trying to figure out what Trump's doing. And what I said last Saturday, and I believe you agreed with me, was the fact that this whole thing is just a negotiating tactic. The 46% tariffs, the 80% tariffs for this country and that country, because in The Art of the Deal, there's a thing called anchoring, right? So once you anchor everyone to your position, now anything below that seems like a concession. And so you get this at when you go to a used car dealership or just actually a new car dealership, they say, hey, we'll give you a great deal, $5,000 over MSRP. And you're like, oh my gosh, these guys are not willing to negotiate. So if you get down in MSRP, you think you won, but you went in with the intention of, I'm going to buy this car 2,000 under invoice. So it's a sense of, okay, if whoever gets to anchor first wins the day. And that's what's happened this week. And you and I predicted it. Now the zero line is 10% tariffs across the board. Everyone thinks that that's the win, that that's the low tariff amount. Whereas just 2 weeks ago, everyone was talking about, oh my gosh, we're going to have tariffs. This is going to be ruinous to the global trade and to every other economy out there. But now look, everyone's saying, well, if we land at 10% across the board, that would be such a win. And that's exactly what's happened. So there's one country outstanding, and that's China, which is now obviously at 145%. But that's my hot take. I would say, like you said, we predicted the markets would go up and down, and it's probably going to go up and down. And I think we're in a bear market that should have started quite a while ago. The one thing we didn't predict was the bond market blowing up, and we can talk about that along the way.
Here's, can you hear me, G?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my take. It looks like it's taking a second. I did a short on this, so I'm going to prop myself, and this is my take on, because G is, looks like G is absolutely correct. It is The Art of the Deal. Trump is bombastic, period. And let me get this up here. Try again. I put out a comprehensive podcast on Trump's tariffs, detailing the truth that TDSers, Democrats, And the mainstream media won't tell you. Trump's working for the working class. It's the elitists who are pissed right now. I predicted companies would immediately come to the table, and they did. Nearly every country, about 70, are willing to renegotiate tariffs. People, read Art of the Deal. Trump opens with big demands, knowing he'll secure the key parts, then praises trade partner for a great deal. What the fearmongers and doomsayers don't tell you, we have the leverage. Our trade partners have abused this system for generations. We are on a road to economic collapse. And without acting, we have everything to lose. Trump's doing what previous presidential cowards refused to do, negotiate a better deal. Oh yeah.
That's right.
so the reason I posted that is only because G's absolutely correct. If you read Art of the Deal, this is what burns me up when people say he didn't even write that book. I'm like, really? So ghostwriting, it's only on Trump. It reminds me when they say, well, Trump thought the New York Central Five were all racist and guilty and all that. I'm like, so did all of New York City, including right. The black DA, including all the black Democrats. And the Puerto Ricans too. The Puerto Rican mamas were saying, "Oh yeah." The whole nation thought it's like everybody wants to isolate and blame everything on Trump and not give him any credit, and that's exactly what's happening. And we did predict a lot of things correctly. Now I'm still going to hold to my prediction in the sense of China's going to buckle. I think, remember I said China's going to puff their chest out? Yeah, I think we're in that process of them puffing their chests out of them. But I am a little nervous. I'm like, boy, they quickly threw those tariffs back, but they don't have any leverage. And this is what you call playing poker, and we're going to talk about that. So, but I just wanted to say, if you have not heard that podcast, it's a long one. So while you're washing your car or you're doing something or you're working, put it on. And
driving up to LA.
Yeah. So what makes it good to listen to is we put everything in layman terms, and that's our shtick. We are at least I'm a working class. G's one of these smart brainy types. I'm the average Joe. Give me a beer, burp. But that said, take a listen to it. So this is its first week to get the audience to rehash a little bit. What G said, it's a universal 10% tariff. That's now pretty much permanent. That's not going away because they're all worried about the 50, 60, 90%. They're like, let's get rid of 10% sounds great. And he started out with that. That was April 3rd. And that 10% tax on all U.S. imports. And they collected $2.3 billion already, the very less than a week later. However, it has created some chaos, as they expected. Major ports, e.g., like L.A., Newark, they're seeing 20 to 30% delays with $80 billion in goods. And what's happening? Don't think small business. Oh, just a few items. So a million products of something that's cheap, that's $5 a pop, could be costing that company an extra $100,000. Or so you're looking at some of the slowdowns caused by companies going, well, I can't afford that. I don't know if I can go through with this now with this new tariff. And so the tariffs, it compounds at scale. It's forcing price hikes. Again, the example I said, 10 million in toys faces a $1 million tax hit. So we're not talking small money here. So not small shots, but giants like Walmart. And so Walmart will continue to push their products through, but they're going to have to eat it early on. But eventually, those stores are going to go with the guy, cha-ching, 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 if this goes on too long. So there is risk. Shoppers will pay more. However, you're not going to see the full 60, 80, 90. You're going to see about a 1% increase early on. That can jack up later to about 6%. After in terms of what you pay more. This is all based off of historical data we went through last week. But there is logistic chaos. Real quick, G, your thought on, because you don't hear about that in the news, but to be fully transparent, there's a bit of that. But do you think that's just part of the process? We just deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about, decades of a process that we've had in place. And now, all of these go into effect for all countries, not just China. So this is going to be a process. I think we'll be fine. There'll be a short-term disruption, probably the next 2 months, but yeah, I think we'll be fine. And as always, Americans figure it out, and we'll be humming along pretty quickly.
Right, exactly. Now, just to remind the audience, there's like a 50% tax rate, I think, on Vietnam. I wanted to say 90%, but 50% is what I have in my notes.
That
But
was
they're
the proposed. Yeah.
yeah, they're exorbitant. They are exorbitant tax rates. And you only look, okay, 60%. Yeah, that sounds terrible, but is it doable? No, it's not doable when you've got 10 million worth of goods. All of a sudden it's not a profit margin, it's a loss. And the reason
Well, the
Trump
90%, what you're thinking about is probably what. So they had 90% on our goods coming into their country.
Right. Oh, that's right. There were two
Yeah.
columns there. But the point is, these are exorbitant. And these were done for one purpose and one purpose only. And this is where G and I deviate from the mainstream media, from those with TDS, from Democrats. They're trying to tell you, and they're acting as if, oh my God, this is permanent. No, this was done to get them to the negotiation table. Period. End of period. End of story. Now here's a kicker that I hadn't thought about. So the U.S. Treasury, they're targeting firms. They're working with other nations. So, for example, in Malaysia, about a dozen that they have found goods, mostly from China, were shipped to Malaysia, relabeled as if coming from Malaysia to completely ignore the tariff cost. That's China. So all you defenders of China, probably the same people who were like during the Chinese festival during the coronavirus, hey, come on down, your thoughts real quick. I mean, I hadn't foreseen that, but I mean, it makes sense.
No, I expect shenanigans like that to occur, and you get these people who go, well, not all Asians are Chinese, but you look at what they're doing, and they're trying to actually pretend that they're another Asian country, right? So you're
Exactly.
gonna see shenanigans like that. I think this China thing is temporary, and playing games like this is not going to be a long term thing. At the same time, I think a lot of companies are going to pull out of China and say, hey, let's actually make it in Malaysia because they actually have a 10% tariff import
Exactly.
rate. So, let's just play by the rules and do the 10%. I think
Right.
actually the biggest beneficiary will be India. I think a lot of companies will go and make their stuff there.
Oh, I completely agree. I think even Pakistan, I don't know the relationship we have with Pakistan, but from my understanding, that's also lots of bodies there. And it sounds terrible, people, but at the end of the day, business is about cost, maintaining low costs. What I think will happen, the one thing I always realized with the global economy is we would eventually be destroyed because of unions. Because once you get to a global economy, all these third world countries are going to undercut unions. And that's what Trump and Scott Bessent saw. They saw that the working class. That's why when you hear these analysts talk about, well, the people are going to suffer are the Rust Belt. No, that's where jobs are going to go back to. Do you think these East Coasters and West Coasters? Do you think they're going to do those jobs in the urban areas? No, but upstate New York they may. In the Fresno or the what do they call it? The rural. We have a whole stretch of rural Central Valley. That's what I'm trying to think.
Yep, right.
Central Valley areas they will. So there's a lot of the coast that will do it. But when people talk about Middle America, what they're saying is don't look at Boston, New York City, Charlotte, North Carolina, Miami, LA, San Fran. Of course, you're not going to see manufacturing there. Real quick, G, and I don't have this in my notes, but your take on manufacturing, because there was a meme that went out where the Chinese government was making fun of bringing back the work because they're proud of the fact that they have literally slave labor doing the sewing machines, doing the old fashioned sweatshop. So they created a little AI video of the fat white guys eating the burger sewing. What your thoughts on that marketing scheme? How far is that going to go?
It's not going to go far. I think a lot of that is just racism, right? And it's
Okay.
reverse racism, right? Come looking at it from an American point of view. I'm torn because China, their population is 4x ours, right? So they have for every one American, there's 4 Chinese in their country,
Oh,
and
wow.
so when you think about how many people, let's say Foxconn or Apple actually hires over there, it's probably 4 times the number that we necessarily need to have on the assembly line. And I say that because the average person over there makes, working in a factory makes $500 an hour, or I'm sorry, $500 a month. So that's
Right.
$6,000 a year. So if we're talking about bringing that job over here, let's say there's 4 of those people. So you take 6,000 times 4, that's 24,000. Well, you're hiring someone here for 60 to 80,000, right? That's up in the air in my mind. Like, the numbers don't pan out necessarily. Like, if you're going to hire somebody for $80,000, I mean, you could have hired 12 Chinese people on the assembly line to do it. So the question is then, what can we get with one American guy making $80,000? Well, I've heard a lot about robotics and AI, and that could really multiply that one person, right? So
Right.
if you think about that from that perspective, you say, okay, well, one guy could probably do the work of 10 here in America if he's assisted by AI and he was assisted by robotics, right? And I say that as a software engineer. As I do my work, I go to AI and I say, help me figure out this algorithm. I know I can do it on my own. I'll spend the next 30 minutes doing it, but I'd rather spend 2 minutes typing it into Grok and having Grok give me an answer, and I just copy and paste that, right? So, and then that just makes me more efficient. I do the work of more people. And so I think in the long run, manufacturing, it will actually go up in price a little bit, but I think we'll get a lot more done over here, and that money stays in America. And I think that will be a good benefit, because an American will go to a restaurant down the street, and then that person running the restaurant makes more money, and that person goes and buys different goods, which helps other Americans. So when the money stays in America, I think that enriches us all.
I agree. I agree. I think there is some concern with AI and technology. You're not going to have the mass assembly lines of people, but it will work itself out. And we got to work on the grid. Here's the other thing they're not talking about, people: the grid and our energy. We're going to talk about that briefly. So we've gotten a little bit off track with some of the comments here, but real quick. So China slapped on. They're like we're what 85%, 100 some odd percent. I mean, we're in the 100% on one another. Vietnam, Malay, all these other countries, they're all coming to the table. The UK is talking now about pushing back. I guess that video that was going around earlier this week, G, of the blonde hair lady who runs Europe. That's another thing. It's like, all you elected leaders of these countries, y'all are run by an unelected shrew right now.
Is that the one who said 0 for 0? She wants to sit down and negotiate 0 for 0.
Well, that's what she said, but that was months ago. Now they're talking about pushing back. They don't have a pot to pee in. They don't have any innovativeness. They don't have anything. They are like, they're dying. Europe is literally dying, and they don't want to admit that. But regardless, you're talking about global pushbacks. I think Germany will be the first to buckle. They've got a massive car, their car imports here. So let's go through some of this. Let's talk about the stocks. The stocks swung wildly. The Dow recovered 1,200 points by April 11th. It got back up above 40,000. Now, G, you were thinking it was going to go below, or it's going to drop to 30,000. But the point is, before I get your thought on that, it dropped 2,200. And just to give you an example, Big John hates Trump, and he was shocked when the video you just saw that I put that video out, because he thought everybody realized how much of an idiot Trump was, yada, yada. And G and I had talked last week, hey, the market's going to go up and down, up and down. Don't worry about it. And that was my whole take. And the next day, it went back up over 40,000. Now, G, I'm not trying to knock you, because I just didn't agree. And at the same time, I could be wrong in terms of how quick China buckles. But are you still going to hold strong, and you think it's going to get down closer to 30,000 as a correction?
Yeah. So the biggest rallies in history have happened. I'll give you some years: 2000, 2008, 1929, 1987. And now. So you can think of what all those years have in common. But I will say that my prediction wasn't necessarily for this week, but it was just over for the next year. I think our markets are wildly overvalued. And, I can get into the bond market thing, but as you can see, a lot of hedge funds are way over leveraged, and they're pouring all their money into the markets, right? So you look at historically the market valuation, we're 200% above normal. So that's 100% overvalued, which would mean a 50% drop in my opinion. So I don't foresee a total 50% drop, but maybe a 25 to 33% drop in my opinion.
Right. And for the audience, just to give you guys an idea, because of the fear mongering. So Apple actually gained 3% because, again, when somebody says something, it moves the market. Well, they're talking. They brought back up, hey, relocation rumors. Whoop, stock goes back up. Target dropped 6%. So you're seeing small fluctuations right now, despite the massive market drops. Now, jobs and prices do take some hits. Stellantis laid off 1,200 from their Ohio. 1,200 in Ohio. They were citing tariff costs. Best Buy started to raise their prices 8 to 12%. Now, this is predictive and reaction. So they're not, so they're saying shoppers are facing the 500 to 1,000 annual cost increase. These are estimates. This is what I call the fear mongering. Apparel, tech retailers, they're being hit. 70% of imported goods face new costs. Low-income households reporting 20% budget strain. All this is a lie in the sense it's happening today. No, this is what they're predicting to happen. They're giving you the death scenario, and it could happen. It could happen. Now, G, give me your thoughts on that, but also give me your thoughts on the fact that nobody's talking about energy imports are being shielded, and that is critical. What there's all those numbers I gave you, part of that formula is rising energy costs. But there are no rising energy costs because there are no tariffs on Canadian crude oil, Mexican natural gas, or Colombian coal. And that is, and Doug Burgum, when I was speaking, no, I'm kidding. I wasn't speaking to him. When I was listening to him in an interview, he specifically brought that up because the media's not talking about this. But that's, nobody's energy and the cost to get your goods to market will not be affected. Your thoughts on what I just said in terms of what the market's saying is going to happen as a doomsday device? And because I think they're saying that to scare people, and your energy thoughts.
No, I mean the market is, while they call it Mr. Market for a reason, it's just one day he's manic and the next day he's depressive. So I would say that in terms of what the cost would be to the American consumer, you can't really predict that. I mean, okay, so let's say the tariff on an item, widget A, is $3, right? So there's a guy who made it and shipped it here. He's paying the $3, so he has a choice. He could either increase the price of his good by $3, or he could take a dollar hit and increase the price by $2 or by $1, right? Then he sells it to the retailer, who could say, okay, I'm not going to increase the price by $3. I'll take a hit of $1. So in the end, the consumer ends up paying $1 more, right? Because the retailer and the supplier, the overseas supplier, both took $1 hits, right? So $1 hit, $1 hit, and the consumer takes $1 hit. So it's hard to predict. And you talked about this last week that, okay, well, the tariffs jumped up 10% in 2017, but the actual consumer goods jumped up by, I think it was 4%. So it was a lot less.
0.7% early on. The ones that stuck, we took a 6% hit of the 10%, and the company ate the rest.
Right. So yeah. So there's that. It's too hard to predict that. Now, in terms of energy, so I always tell people, okay, gas prices. I don't know whether to eat or buy gas for my car, right? Because they're at $4 or $5 a gallon, and those oil companies are making record profits, and those oil companies suck. But we still continue buying gas at $5 a gallon. Why? Why don't we just walk? Right? Why don't I just walk 20 miles to work, go to work for a full day, and walk back? We don't want to. That would take too long. Walking 20 hours will take 4 or 5 hours, and walking back will take 4 or 5 hours, and then you work 8 hours. So it's worth it to pay $10 in gas to go 20 miles this way and 20 miles back, $10 for the one day, because you save so much time and you make that back up by going to work and the relaxation of not having to walk 40 miles in a day. So there's a reason why, and I use that as an example because there's no tariffs on energy, because energy by itself is worth it, even if it's a little overpriced. I think oil prices are coming down right now. So, but we need that because that's an input cost that feeds into everything. So I think Trump has been talking about low energy prices, drill baby drill, and the oil from across the border is just as good as the oil here. It's not like we lost American jobs by doing it. If we wanted to, we could just ramp up oil production and create more jobs. But I think it's better just to buy someone else's oil and save the stuff we have in our ground, right? Because there's a finite amount that we think.
Sure, if it's easily accessible, but at the end of the day, though, G, here's what Doug Burgum, my man Doug, said, that most don't realize. So when they open up federal land, and what Doug was saying was like it's the worst asset he's ever seen, because he goes, we have nothing of what we're worth, and we're worth trillions. And he gave an example. He goes, so when we open up these lands to lease, we're kind of leasing them so people can go you do their magic to drill. It's not just drill, baby, drill. Other forms of energy as well. Natural gas. I guess it is drill, baby, drill. I'm thinking, but natural gas still drill, baby, drill. Shale, drill, baby, drill. So, but here's what else we get. All of the preservation that came in the Gulf of America now, formerly known as the Gulf of Mexico, all of that preservation, all of the cleanup, that was done as part of these lease agreements. So we get more. So are you climate lovers who don't want us to drill here? You are killing the planet by having China do the drilling, by having Pakistan, India, and other coal plants. Whereas we drill here, we get agreements, and they take care of the land. They do it best. Now, here's a catch-22. I got to throw this in as a side note. Y'all get all happy with the fact that, we got those oil rigs 5 miles out. That's where accidents happen because they're drilling so deep versus right off the coast, which is much more safer. So we are our own worst enemy in the name of saving the planet. But the point is I agree with you until I heard that from Doug. And I'm like, there's so many more bonuses. And we have to repeat this, G. COVID taught us that our supply lines are crap when everything hits a fan. And I got news for you, people. In a war, we would not be able to survive long-term right now because of a lack of rare earth minerals, a lack of enough equipment built here, a lack of protecting our technology because China steals our IP, anything that works with China. And we do have security type organizations that shouldn't be working over there that are. So, but the point is, our supply lines, we saw how bad they were. We saw how things came to a crawl, and it's funny. It's like a environmental disaster. Everybody hates the redneck, but it's a redneck with their gas guzzling truck, with their little rigged up boat that goes and saves everybody during COVID. Who was everybody's best friend? The trekkers. Who everybody wants to see put out of business. So my point, G, is this energy. I agreed with you until I heard Doug speak. And I'm like, no, let's drill baby here because we can actually have safe for the climate. We can make sure our environment is cleaned up and we get more than just the energy, So that was pretty impressive in terms of that. Any final comments on last week and your initial thoughts of this week? Because what I want to talk about to the audience, you need to know who Scott Bessent is. And I want to talk about first Scott Bessent's blueprint, explain what happened and why it happened and why the naysayers are completely wrong. Because if G and I could get it, and it's not like we're working for the CIA, the government, for a big super duper corporation, but we kind of pegged it. What would happen? Because of human nature, common sense, and we're workers, we're everyday people. But we've experienced that world. We know how the markets work. We understand the concept. And we pegged it. And Scott Bessent explains it. So that kind of helped. It was like him giving us the answers to the test. Any final comments on everything we talked about up until now?
Are we going to talk about the bond market blow up later?
Oh, no. All right. See, I did not have that in my notes. So let's talk about that now before we go on.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to talk about the Trump pivot, it was because of the bond market blow up. And so you remember back in 1929, the stock market crash is because all these investors were basically borrowing 10x their money. They would put down $1,000 and then basically borrow 9,000 from the banks and then go invest in the stock market. And just a little bit of a drop.
Repeat that for the audience. I caught what you said at the end is when I got the, go ahead.
Yeah. So back in 1929, and it's happening right now, an investor would say, I have $1,000, so I could just invest in whatever stock. And if it goes up by 10%, I make $100. But back then you could say, well, no, the bank's willing to lend me $9,000 more on my 1,000. And if it goes up 10%, right, on the $10,000, it goes up 10%, you make $1,000 on your $1,000. So now you've doubled your money, not just made $100, but $1,000. But it bites the other way too. So when it goes down, you lose a ton of money. So obviously we don't do that with the stock market anymore, but we do that with the bond market. And so the hedge funds are doing that with the bond market. They're saying, bonds don't move up and down like that. So they're basically levering themselves. Leverage means taking out debt and just amass a ton of debt in order to get a few percent on their
Oh,
money.
duh. That's Econ 101. When the market's unpredictable or not safe, it's kind of like you're in deep ocean. Let's swim into closer shore waters, and that's what bonds represent. Bonds
So
represent safer money.
right, and the U.S. Treasuries are the government borrowing from a guy like me, right, or the hedge funds. So the hedge funds giving the U.S. government money, and the government pays some interest. So what happened this week is that the yields jumped up just enough for the banks to come to the hedge funds and say, you know what, you need to liquidate your positions, because they're in that same scenario. Borrow 1,000, or I'm sorry, come with 1,000, borrow 9,000. And they're in that same scenario. And the bank said, you know what? You need to cash out because we need our money back. We think that you're way over leveraged. And so these hedge funds were forced to sell their bonds. When you
So what's that
sell
mean?
bonds, say again?
So what's that mean? I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't understand how it affected in terms of what are you trying to get the average person to understand here?
Right. So basically, when you're trying to sell a bond, you're trying to get cash. And then there was basically a cash crunch out there. There wasn't enough cash for the bonds. So they're willing to sell the bonds for lower, and they're losing money just to get cash back so they can pay the banks. So this whole system is basically Mexican standoff, and it was about to blow up. And someone came to Trump, probably Bessent came to Trump and said, look, this thing's about to go south. And that's not what Trump wanted. Like, I think Trump doesn't care about the stock market going down, but the bond market going down. That's like the housing market going down in 2008. This is like real serious stuff. So the balloon needs to deflate, right? But you need to let it deflate over a long period of time. If it all deflated in 1 or 2 weeks, you know what? Where everyone would be pointing, they'd be all pointing at Trump, saying, "You did this."
Right.
So
Right.
that was the problem. And the
Right, and
problem
that,
is everyone's over leveraged. Everyone's borrowed too much, but they would all blame Trump.
and exactly, and that's the genius of Scott Bessent. Trump doesn't care; he's got his end goal. But Trump is smart enough to know, well, I don't have the expertise to implement it. That's how he's, especially in construction. There's a lot of key people he pointed out in terms of helping the everyday working class, and they all stabbed him in the back, in 2016. Like, he did all this for you, you're stabbing him in the back still. But he's put the right people in the right place. And that's where Scott Bessent. So to me, this was planned. Before we talk about Scott Bessent, I want to address G's point in terms of Trump didn't care, because he didn't. But this is what I tell Big John sometimes, and this is how this is why I had a successful business. Sometimes you don't have the answer at that moment. You know what the answer is, but you got to let it come to you. So I think what happened here, and this is Scott Bessent's doing, let's watch. We know what our steps are. We're not sure when we're going to implement the step. So when Scott Bessent saw all this happening, he went to Trump, Mr. President, as we discussed, now we pull the trigger. You need to come out and tell everybody, great time to invest. And then we announce what's happening. And we're going to talk about, so that's a good segue. So that is the genius of Scott Bessent. It's like people who say they didn't know what he was doing, this or that. No, they let the market happen as they knew it would happen. You can't predict the unpredictability of the market, but they knew how to react to it. And they were waiting for that unpredictability to dictate when to react. And that's why when Big John was panicking and throwing Smoot-Hawley, I'm just like, dude, I know what you're talking about, but I wasn't concerned because I knew Trump would come out and say something. And I got the historic data we're going to talk about to back that up. And I knew the markets would come back up. Why? Because as a child, watching Walter Cronkite and Reagan, and Reagan said something, and I was a kid, I'm like, I correlated. So they're saying that he said this and the market went up. And as a kid, I'm thinking, well, he needs to say a lot of good things. The market keep going up. I was a dumb kid at the time. But the point is, even from a little kid, I realized when presidents speak or when rumors start like Apple, rumors are going to come invest, the markets react. So I was not worried about that 22. No, I'm lying. I was concerned about that 2,200 point drop, G, but I knew Trump's going to have to react now. So with that said, let's get into Bessent. Scott. G, had you heard of Scott Bessent before he became Treasury Secretary?
No, never heard of the guy before.
Yeah, I've known of him grow. No, I never heard of him neither. I never paid attention. I heard of him after he got nominated, etc. But I didn't pay attention to Scott Bessent until about 3, 4 weeks ago when I started listening. When I started noticing that he was sticking out. He wasn't doing press conferences. He was doing all the shows, but he was doing what Trump did. He was doing all the podcasts. You know,
Hmm.
because you never see them when they're doing their weekly conferences in the formal setting, but you see them on your favorite podcast. And that's what I found. So when I noticed that, I'm like, so what's this guy got to say? And I found him fascinating. So they call it Bessent, Scott Bessent. Is it Bessent or Bessent?
I believe it's Bessent, Scott Bessent.
Bessent. Scott Bessent's Tariff Blueprint Explained. So for y'all that don't know, he is a Secretary of the Treasury. He is Trump's chief strategist, trade strategist, and he's the one who unveiled the April 2nd tariffs, 10% universal and up to 46% reciprocal. And real quick to reiterate G's point, the 10% is permanent now because everybody will be happy with just 10%. And that was part of the go. That's just typical negotiation. In fact, I did that a couple of times as a small company to larger companies when we were creating fantasy content. I'd give them a price. I knew I've got like they're going to come down. We got to come down, but we come down to our price. So that's a common business tactic that for some reason the mainstream media Democrats refuse to acknowledge. So it was a calculated shock, as how he puts it, to rewire the global trade, and he did. That was with an April 9th briefing. He came. My proof: the New York Post is one that reported on that, and his explanation gives us his strategy of turning chaotic tariffs into a coherent plan, and it's going to rally the allies, silence the critic, and pressure adversaries. And I say that because it rallied the allies. Sure, come on in, bro. We'll talk to you. We'll talk about those tariffs. It silenced the critics. 70 countries are talking. You were giving doomsday scenarios, and it pressures its adversaries. China's on an island alone. That's right now. It could change. So it's what I call shock and leverage. Tariffs were weaponized, and what I discovered this week in my research is we are a $17 trillion economy for the world. That's how much we are worth to the world in our consumer and what we buy. So it jolted the trading partners. The Dow plunged 2,200, and that was no accident. Now the 2,200 number they may not have known, but it's what I'm talking about. They knew the market would drop, so that drop was no accident. But while everybody was doomsaying it here, Vietnam, Japan, Thailand, Canada, Mexico, India, all these other countries, they were like, oh my, they were even more worried when they saw the market drop because they had no control over the market drop. We had control over that market drop. So, and that's why they came to the table. And Vietnam didn't go to 12 billion tariff cuts for us. So Bessent's framing, how he's framed this, meaning the actions he's taken, that has made the market see the panic as leverage, not failure, in terms of people who actually are following this scenario. Now, I said that. Maybe I was a little confusing. Your thoughts on it and what you want to the audience about that?
No, I think it's absolutely true. Bessent's true that overseas, I believe it was a lot of the markets on Sunday night, our Sunday night, were dropping big. And that's why they're predicting a Black Monday for us, is they were looking at all the markets out there and saying, okay, if they're dropping big, we're going to drop big too. But I think what really caused them to think twice over there was, okay, the billionaire of the world, right? If I think of like a party, you think there's 170 people at this cocktail party. Well, there's one guy who's the billionaire. That's the United States. And they
Right.
all want the United States to come to their dinner party.
Yep.
And so they're saying, oh, well, this billionaire might not come to our dinner party. So then we're going to be stuck with, making ground beef for the rest of you schlubs. So I think everyone's out there, all the world leaders going, okay, we need to make sure the United States comes to our dinner party. And here's why. A lot of these countries, they're democratically elected. And if they go into a recession or a depression because we stop buying from them, then they're not going to be reelected. So I think they all know the writing on the wall. Also, their hedge funds in their countries, a lot of, especially the EU and Japan, they had to sell bonds in order to make up the shortfall in their stock market. So they were incurring losses that could have blown up their economies. this week. I mean, that was a real danger zone type of scenario.
Right. And so what G is saying, people, when we put the sky high rates like 49% on Cambodia, that's a number, and that it was 49%. What G is saying at the dinner party, they're like, oh shit, we got 49%. We need them to come to our party. What are we going to do? Hey, let's talk 0% on everybody. And all of a sudden, the guy who represents the U.S., I like that. What time's your dinner party? Or better yet, I'll come on down to my house here.
When
and
you,
they're like,
when you invite the billionaire over, you don't ask him to bring a bottle of wine. You just invite him and hope he comes. Right?
Exactly.
So you don't ask him to bring anything.
Exactly. And this is not just for terrorist people, because part of this process was to cover the non-tariff barriers. So, for example, technically speaking, when I did my research a couple of weeks ago, China only had 6 or 7% tariffs, but it's all the red tape, all the stuff to get through that starts jacking that price up. It's kind of like when California says, oh, that's not a tax, it's a fee. There's no difference in it. So that was also, so Bessent sowed this. And real quick, China has a 600 billion IP theft as reported by the FBI. So when somebody does software, for example, you will find that software's code in all of a sudden China's newest software. They just flat out steal it. So Bessent sowed this plan as not protectionism, but more of we're going to get them to come to the table to talk to us. He wasn't saying we're using these shares to protect us and we're going to keep these shares. He's like, no, this is just opening the door for discussion. Then there was the strategic pause. This is what I was talking about, G. They were waiting for the market to drop. They were waiting for everything to get to a low point, and then Trump would come in like a knight on a white horse. Let's hold off on the tariffs, because you guys are good guys. Remember what I said in that 60-second short? Trump, after the deal gets done, but during the deal, after the deal gets done, he's like, yeah, man, you're a great trade partner. You made a great deal. And that's what Trump is saying. Hey, you're a great trade partner. You decided to come to the table, so we're going to put a 90-day pause, And he also did it to reveal who the bad players are. And there's only one bad player, and that is China. China's traveling. Xi is traveling to Vietnam. So I'm curious to see if he's going to be able to sway Vietnam. And I don't think he will, because Trump will just jack up those tariffs. He sees that China's using these other countries to form out their factories, their work. They have factories built in Vietnam. So I don't think that will work. But in essence, Bessent's narrative, obviously Trump is the mouthpiece, but it's Bessent's narrative that has kept global partners hopeful, not hostile. And as G and I have said, all of a sudden that permanent 10% tariff looks very attractive. Your thoughts on the fact the narrative is keeping the global partners happy? Let's extend the party into the after hours.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. I mean, now it's going to be we're doing you a favor and all that. And I'm sure there's a lot going on behind the scenes of it's not just the trade, right? If you look at Panama Canal, right? And just if I could segue into that for a second.
That's my backyard.
Yeah. We're sending troops over there to take back the Panama Canal, but I'm sure there's a lot more that we've promised Panama behind the scenes, like improving infrastructure and having favored trading partner status and all that. So I'm sure there's a lot going on behind the scenes with all these other countries that's on the table. I don't believe we've settled negotiations with anybody yet, but I would expect the first ones to come out next week. And I think Vietnam will be the first, because they were the first to say, hey, 0 for 0.
Right. I'm going to digress into Panama real quick since you brought it up. This is very important to me, because you're going to hear, especially libertarians, they're the worst of the lot. And the reason I always bring libertarians up is my partner's libertarian, so I get an earful of libertarianism. So it's an easy example to make of. Troops in Panama. They want troops in Panama. Panamanians love the Yankee. Every time I go back to visit, man, life was so good when the Americans were here. Why? Americans had money. We had the dollar. Your little daughter living who was poor or below, all of a sudden has a chance to get married to the GI. And I'm not saying this as a joke. It's true in every country. It's like that because of the power of our country in terms of the potential. How hard you work is there's no limit to what you can achieve. Panama saw that. But real quick on Panama Canal, it turns out China has blocked the sale from the company to BlackRock. You're right, G. You're aware of that. So BlackRock is buying the authority to run the canal. They're not buying the canal, but they're buying the rights to run it. And with that, it's kind of like I was saying about leasing. We're leasing these lands so people can create energy, drill for oil, etc. Same thing in Panama. So they make the profits. They set the prices. It turns out, G, on the Panama Canal, and I apologize, it's very important. The company that runs it is in debt. They haven't been paying the bill. So that's why troops are being sent. They're saying this is because America's like this.
The Panama is a Panama company or a Chinese company?
I don't know what company. No. Okay. Yes, it's a Hong Kong company. They have not been paying the bill. So now that gives, with our help, that gives the Panamanian authorities, and they've taken them to court already. You're delinquent, and that is our legal impetus to just take the canal. And that's what we are in the process of doing. And they're not talking about this in the news, but they will eventually, sooner than later. So I just wanted to sit there and say that I've held off because it's the country where I was born and raised. A weird tale. The hospital I was raised in, like an idiot when I was there visiting, bam, hit my head, all bleeding there. Got to go to the hospital. 3 days to that hospital closing down, where I was born at. So I was born in that hospital, and 3 days before it closed down, because we were leaving, pulling out, I went to the hospital. Just a little tidbit. Just one of those weird things in life. So that said, let's get back to the tariffs. Gee, I want to talk about real quick about we'll talk about it here. So the economic goals. Bessent forecast 300 billion in tariff revenue by 2026, and that 300 billion. Now, in the grand scheme of things, of 38 trillion in debt, people are going to say, "Well, that's nothing. That's nothing." Wrong, because it's not designated to clear the debt. It's designated as revenue to help rebuild manufacturing in Ohio, Michigan. Now, I don't buy Ohio, Michigan yet, because I think a lot of this manufacturing is going to go to the South. Why? What's it saying? Work to hire to work, right to work.
Right to work, yeah.
No unions. So that I actually see that happening. But the money's going to be used to begin implementing our manufacturing. And you're not hearing this from the mainstream media or the analysts. You're hearing it from the average Joe's, G, and I. He also downplayed inflation risk, noting that the 2018 tariffs only raised prices 0.7%. And he promised the revenue would fund the tax cuts for the bottom 50% to ease the consumer pain, as the Trump tax cuts did the first time around. So he's pushing a data-driven pitch to give the plan economic credibility. You're a numbers guy, G. When you hear this, what do you think, and how do we get the average Joe to understand this?
I mean, how do we get them to understand? I'm not sure. I mean, they need to basically, one, there's no tax plan yet. And we talked a lot last week that the tariffs are meant to offset the tax cuts, right? So you bring in the revenue that would be lost from the tax cuts in order to help balance the budget or get closer to balancing the budget. So, but here's the thing. So when you cut someone's taxes by 10%, you've just saved that person 10% of their entire salary. Whereas if you increase tariffs on goods by 10%, you're only increasing the cost by 10% on what you choose to buy, if it's even 10%. We already
6%.
Talked about 6%, right? Or 3%, whatever the number ends up being. But that basically will push us to being a nation of savers, because now everyone's keeping more because their taxes are lower. And now they're thinking twice before they buy something, right? So the question is that a good thing for our economy? We've always been a spend, spend, spend. You remember George W. Bush going after 9/11, get out there and spend, buy stuff for yourself. And, we've just always been that way. Let's spend our money. And in Japan and China, they're a nation of savers. So they're selling us stuff and they're taking the cash and they're holding it.
Right.
And so now we're borrowing money from them, right? And we're selling bonds to them. They're some of the buyers of our bonds, Japanese, Chinese.
Right. No, I agree. I think the public will get it if the media talked about it, but they won't, because they hate Trump. It makes Trump look good. So when it came to a recession, Bessent dismissed this as hysteria. Again, pointing to the 2018 to the 2020 wins, 16% wage growth for low-income workers, the bottom 50%, 3.5% unemployment, and 40% wealth gains for the bottom 50%. That came because of the Trump tax cuts. And what G was talking about, we don't have those tax cuts this go around yet, but they just passed the bill, and it's in the process of happening. And it's going to pass with every Republican voting for it. Even the Massies of the world will vote for it. So Bessent has framed the tariffs as fixing the $1 trillion trade deficit through reciprocal fairness, not isolation, meaning we're not doing these tariffs to isolate us. We're using these tariffs to bring them in to negotiate to get fair reciprocal, or to get reciprocal fairness. Any disagreement or thoughts on that?
No, not at all. I think it will lead in the long run to growth. Just
Exactly.
I don't think it will be the short term, because and Trump's even said that there's going to be short term pain, and he said that I believe it was late February or early March. So it wasn't after the tariff thing and seeing the turmoil in the markets. It was long before that. He said there's going to be some short term pain. We just got to get through it so we have a lot of prosperity ahead.
Now, I will say this: his messaging is lacking. He. This is where Susie Wiley needs to get on him. Boss, stop with the nonsense here. Well, don't say it like that. Boss, we love your nonsense. Or boss, we love what you say. It's go Trump, go Trump. But you need to say this, this, and this. We need to prepare them so you have the support, so they're not scared to death with the people who don't like you. Let's get real. I don't want to spend a lot of time. Just a couple of minutes on Smoot-Hawley. So people are throwing the Smoot-Hawley. Again, this was in my notes. I didn't even put it in our big discussion because to me it was so irrelevant. It was enacted in 1930 after the 1929 stock market crash. It went fully into effect in 1931. The Great Depression stemmed more from Wall Street's excesses. They just thought the market would never go down. They just thought it was like fool's gold. We've all seen the movies, of how everybody was spent, and then it crashed. And then, yes, people did commit suicides. People jumping off out of their buildings because they lost everything. And that was because of the excesses, the roaring 20s, the gay 90s and the roaring 20s, or whatever it was. But we were living large. And the irony, it's ironic that Wall Street blames the tariffs for the economic risk, giving its role in 1929. And what I'm trying to say is, in 1930s, there was a 40 to 50% tariff hit post 1929, yet we had an $8 billion trade surplus. Right now, it's 10 to 60% for negotiation tactics, but we're in a $1 trillion deficit. So we're in a completely different situation. The depression came from Wall Street's greed, not trade, meaning back and forth between the nations. But now they're crying. Now they're trying to say, well, look at Smoot-Hawley. Look at all that. That's what caused all the depression. And it's not. And that's what I call it's fear-mongering. They're trying to say the Smoot-Hawley Act is causing depression. And they're trying to say what Trump is doing here is similar to the Smoot-Hawley Act. But they're lying to you because the depression, the stock market crash happened a year before Smoot-Hawley. And we are in a completely different scenario. Trump's fix reverses decades of asymmetrical deals. I had to look that up. Uneven, unfair deals. Fancy word. Because our U.S. factories were killed off. This isn't about punishment. This is about rebuilding us. And we are in a stronger economy where we can push back because we have the leverage and we have better communications, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a misleading historical analogy. The critics are scaring you. They're oversimplifying. They're flat out lying. They're trying to get you to think that the Smoot-Hawley Act is the reason the depression happened and that Trump's doing the same thing here. That's right. When Big John brought it up to me, I kind of chuckled as I'm typing back, dude, come on, man. Because he had, I think they truly believe that, but as we always do, G, if you guys could see my notes, 5,000 words, 8,000 word notes, I'll send you. Here's tonight's show. G, your thoughts on the Smoot-Hawley's Act and our strategic intent today versus what it was meant to do back then?
I mean, that's when you think about like I'm trying to think of an analogy, like a plane is crashing, right? And there's smoke coming out of the engine. And they say, oh, the plane's crashing because the smoke's coming out of the engine. Like, no, that's not why the engine's on fire.
Right.
And something happened there, and the smoke's coming out as a result of that. So I'm going to use that analogy, and it's probably not perfect, but so up until now, until the Smoot-Hawley thing became okay, let's use this as the beginning of the Great Depression. Everyone said the stock market caused the Great Depression, the stock market crash, I should say, in October 1929. And I'm thinking, no, that even back then, I'm like, that's not even accurate. I've done my research in this. Now, that did start it. That started the dominoes. Smoot-Hawley also was one of the dominoes, which actually made it worse. But the reason why everything was crashing back then was the Federal Reserve was saying, let's raise interest rates. They actually raised interest rates during a time where people were losing money. So when everyone's losing money, you hold on to whatever dollar you have, and you're not going to spend it or invest it. So there's this thing called money velocity. Like if I print one money and I give it to you, and then you give it to someone else, and then over a year we give it to 10,000 people, that $1 is actually $10,000. But if we all, like, I hold on to the dollar and I never give it to you, that $1 stays $1, right? So that's what was happening back then. Everyone's like, oh, I'm holding on to my dollars, and the money supply starts crashing because no one's spending as much as they used to, or investing. And then Smoot-Hawley comes along and makes it even worse, right? So I'll go back to the example I gave at the beginning of the show. An investor going into the stock market comes with $1,000 and borrows $9,000. Let's say he loses $4,000. Well, 1,000 of the four was his. Well, who did the other $3,000 belong to? It belonged to the bank. And the bank borrowed it from all regular schmoes like you and me. So we're all losing money. Well, our grandparents were all losing money. And so that was the real reason. Now everyone's just saying Smoot-Hawley, Smoot-Hawley, because it's like, oh, if we say Tariff did this, then Tariffs will do that now. Well, we're not currently losing money. The money supply is not slowing down or dropping significantly. So it's a false analogy.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, and what G is meaning when he says you have 1,000, you can spread it around to 10,000. He's talking about the bank. The bank uses it to invest, to loan to other people, etc., etc. And that's how the money grows, and that's how we grow. But I got a bone to pick with you, G. Odds are your grandparents and my grandparents, we weren't nowhere near America at the time.
Yeah. No, that's right. So my grandparents were in India
They were
working as
suffering. In fact, the rest of the world recovered before us because of the Fed always messing around with that.
my grandparents were carrying milk from one part of town to the other and making a couple cents. That's how they made their money.
And they're still better off than my grandparents. My grandparents were probably working on the canal at that time. We got a picture of an old Chinese guy for the family, and I said, "Little kid, who's that?" That's like your great grandfather. And like, what's he here? Later on, I learned we all assumed he worked at the canal because the French brought tons of Chinese over to work on the canal. But so that said, Trump's tariffs are corrective. They're not reckless. Smoot-Hawley was a reckless policy. And Trump's tariffs are meant to rebalance the trade and to protect American workers. Gee, why were the Smoot-Hawley tariffs imposed?
It was to raise revenue. So what was happening is back then, the idea was the federal government needs to balance their budget at any cost. So they actually increased taxes on the rich. Who did that? Herbert Hoover. He increased it, I believe it was 25% to 63% in order to bring more revenue into the federal government. Well, these guys are the ones creating jobs. So they're like, well, if you're taking my money, I need to lay off some people. So because my money's mine. So that was the reason why. I do want to say that back then there wasn't the knowledge of, okay, well, if so you going back to your question, if we raise tariffs, then we increase revenue to also, right? So they raised taxes and tariffs, but all these other countries around the world did the same. So they had these trade wars. And so they didn't have the knowledge of today that that's not a good thing. You're going to slow down trade.
And that kept the world in a recession as well. It kept that ongoing recession.
Right. And that's not what's happening right now. Everyone's coming to the table because they realize that Trump's called them out. All the countries out there, you've had tariffs on us and we've had zero on you. So now we're going to put tariffs on you. And they realize, oh, wait a minute. The rest of the world started the trade war, not Trump.
Right, exactly. Now, for all of you guys, Herbert Hoover was a great philanthropist, a kind man. He was giving bad advice. He did get into real estate. They were called Hooverville. Hoovervilles were shanty towns built by the homeless. I'm being sarcastic. I mean, and Hoovervilles, that was used against him in his reelection. He went down in flames. Yeah. Because I studied him. I was like, God, he seemed like, it's like everything's like he was this, just made the worst decision of his life. He was not the person that history has portrayed him.
I think he won 2 states in 1932. I mean, he was trounced.
Exactly. So to close this out, Smoot-Hawley's comparisons, they're a scare tactic, people. They're using it to distort history and Trump's goals. People who have TDS, people who are Democrats, people progressives, and the mainstream media. They're focusing on one thing. They're not even looking at the bigger picture. If they did and they were honest with you, they wouldn't have even brought up Smoot-Hawley. They're missing the fact that this was a unique circumstance of each era, and the focus on fixing longstanding trade disadvantages were different in each area. So let's talk about Bessent's pivotal influence. So he's a plan's architect and voice. He controls the narrative. His messaging is what has calmed markets. Obviously, Trump's doing the talking, but it's his messaging. He's leveraging his hedge fund pedigree to quiet Wall Street's freak out. He's seen all this before. So he went to Florida. That's where he convinced Trump to highlight the negotiations. It's like, stop hammering. Stop saying, I wish I could do a Trump imitation, but some sarcastic Trump thing.
Just do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't do that one. He hasn't lived that one down.
But the point is Trump, sometimes he doesn't speak as well as he should. And he said, don't do the brinkmanship, talk about the negotiations. And he did. He's got UP unity. It's Bessent's clarity. It's his strategy risk that is keeping this from looking like reckless chaos. The people stating it's reckless chaos are the people who just want to see Trump fail. These are the same people who say they care about America, but they're lying. They'd rather see Trump fail than succeed. Because if he succeeds, that means the working class, the 50% that has no long-term future right now, Trump is saving. They would be on board with Trump. So his Roji ensured that the world buys Trump's vision from Rust Belt voters, where this is going to affect, to the foreign capitals that are having to deal with this. Now, before I get your thoughts, I want to talk about Black Wednesday brilliance, as I call it. Are you aware of Black Wednesday and the UK pound?
No, this is the first time I'm hearing about it.
So, for all of you conservatives, okay, make sure you're sitting down. Make sure you're holding on to something. Don't be holding your dog. You may squeeze him to death. Scott Bessent, I don't want to say he's a disciple, but he helped make George Soros an even richer man than he is today. So Bessent's genius, it shined like a beacon of light, a dark light, I guess. In 1992, it's called Black Wednesday, when he helped George Soros's quantum fund bet against the British pound. That netted George Soros $1 billion in one day. He was Soros's key strategist. He noticed that the UK was using foreign money to buy the pound, and what that did in layman terms, it made the pound stronger. It made the pound valuable. In layman terms, 1 pound would be worth $10, where if they hadn't been doing it, 1 pound would only be worth $5. I'm just tossing numbers. I have no clue, but just to give you an idea of what the UK was doing. He saw that. And so and maybe you can put this in layman terms, because he orchestrated massive short selling that forced the pound's devaluation. You know what short selling is, G? Can you explain it to the audience?
Yeah, you borrow an item and sell it, and then you promise to pay back that item later.
So that's what he did. He was ruthlessly precise. He turned these market cracks into chaos, and he bent the global system to his will. Y'all need to understand that. Let that sink in. Take a deep breath, people, because what we're saying is he changed the world market. And in one day, earned $1 billion. Never in my lifetime have I ever seen anything earn $1 billion in one day. It's going to happen. Rockstar GT5, I think, made like 500 million day one, 500, 600 million. So that will eventually happen. But this is 1992, $1 billion. So he went from Soros to Trump. Now, like I said, he's a Soros guy. Y'all don't know that. On a side note, he's a good-looking guy, masculine-looking. Then my friend goes, he's gay too? And I laugh. And then I go, oh, I'm supposed to care? Because I don't care. But it's like you think you got one layer peeled back, then there's another layer. And the reason I bring this up, conservatives, we're supposed to hate all this, but you don't. This is like stealing. If you're a Yankees fan, this is like making the trade with Boston for Babe Ruth. That's what Trump has done here. He's taken Babe Ruth from Boston, from Soros's camp, brought him to Trump's camp. So Bessent's shift from Soros' globalist open market ideology to a Trump nationalist, America first trade war, that's a stunning pivot. So in essence, he was once a disciple of Soros's borderless finance, pushing deregulation and pushing currency plays. He soured on the globalization toll because he saw the job losses. He's like, oh my God, I am the devil. I am creating all this chaos, all this, it's killing the working class. So by 2025, he embraced this strategy as a tool to rebuild U.S. dominance. And I'm not sure you saw it, but he was invited to a luncheon by the bankers, the globalists, and he said, you had your day. For the next few years, it's the working classes' day. And over the last couple of years, I've come to realize Trump may be a narcissist. Trump may care about his legacy. He may look at it this way, think that way. You know what? We're all like that. People who say they're not that, they're freaking liars. We all look about how we want to be remembered. We want our kids to have a world that's going to be able to earn more than what we earn, etc. That's Trump. Now, Trump is a narcissist. Trump can be cruel, but when you get to that level of billionaires, they have that ugly streak in them. But I truly believe Trump has also had a soft spot in his heart for the country that made him go from a millionaire to a multi-billionaire. So he's embraced these tariffs as a way to rebuild it. And the reason I brought up that Black Wednesday, is to show his ruthlessness, his ability to understand the big picture, his ability to take a calculated risk. There's a difference, people. Calculated risk is when you have all the numbers, you see the potential paths, you do everything to consolidate your what you're doing down one road, and he's done all that. That's a calculated risk versus what the mainstream media and the Democrats are trying to say. It's chaos. They don't know what they're doing. What's your take on everything I've said about the George Soros dark ties?
No, I mean, obviously he knows what he's doing if he can manipulate currencies, and I mean that's complex to do short selling on currencies. And to use your example, that's like he's selling the pound and getting $10 American dollars, waiting for the pound to drop to $5, but he's got $10 in his hand now, and he buys the pound back, and now he gets 2 pounds, right? So that's the kind of genius that it takes to do short selling. I don't do short selling because it's just you got to be right in so many ways. But someone like that has to have a complex mind and a big risk taker, and I think that's what's happening right now. It's a big risk taker. He's more libertarian as well, but one of my friends was saying, I don't believe that Trump has a strategy because I don't know what it is. Oh, okay, so
so you don't know what it is. He doesn't have one.
So when you go to the car dealership and the guy doesn't say, well, here's my rock bottom price. Well, we'll start up here at $80,000. You go, okay, well, screw all this. I'll take your rock bottom price. Like Trump's not going to do that. And I'm sure that's Bessent's, that's just Trump's way, right? Bessent came in probably saying, here's what we're doing. And Trump probably polished that, right? In my mind, because this
gotta be honest,
Trump's. Go ahead.
I say I don't see Trump polishing anything. I think this is one of those things. It's so sophisticated. There's only I don't want to say a handful. There could be millions of people, but it's such a small percentage in terms of the overall human population that understands and knows exactly. Because we are breaking it down to the layman terms, but to have the cojones to actually put it into action is something different. It's
here's where I say, I think Bessent probably came to Trump. Obviously, I don't know, right? But this is where I say Trump put his polish on it. Bessent came to Trump and said, look, let's put 20% across the board and then we'll settle at 10. I think
Oh yeah,
Trump
yeah, yeah,
said,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
"Oh no, 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 let's go way higher. Let's go way higher." And then I look like the magnanimous one, right? And like you said, part of that's ego, but part of that is I think he does want to make America better. So that's where I think Trump put his polish. He probably that chart he probably that he showed on Liberation Day, he probably moved those numbers way up, just so that he can show them coming way down during negotiations.
right. And I'm not gonna. I just want to make a brief comment on him. So every genius, every mob boss has what has their thug. And in Bessent's thug, he's not a thug. I'm just giving you an analogy. It's Howard Lutnick. He's going. So he's the one who's actually going to be negotiating these deals. So Bessent's is Secretary of Treasury, Lutnick's the Secretary of Commerce, but he's a deal breaker. He's working with Canada and Mexico. He's a lightning rod guy. And who's the other guy? Peter Navarro. Peter, everybody's hating on Peter Navarro, but you're an idiot, and that includes Elon Musk. You're an idiot, Elon, because you're so on the spectrum and so brilliant, but you're failing to see the obvious. Peter Navarro's there with a specific job to scare people into thinking this is the norm. And then when it's not becoming the norm, woo, we're happy. He's creating this part of the chaos process, I think, that Bessent wanted out there, to scare foreign nations. But they knew that the mainstream media would jump on Navarro too. And maybe I'm overanalyzing it, but I think Scott Bessent is that brilliant, and he's instructed Peter Navarro, "This is your job." Your thoughts, G?
No, I believe. I mean, I don't know much of these guys' background, but I'm learning along the way. I've been focused more on the big picture items, but it does seem like the good cop, bad cop approach is good, especially with these foreign countries. That my same libertarian friend, he's like, "Don't you think Trump has just ruined our relationship with all these, world leaders around the world?" I said, "No, political memory is very short, and especially when you say." I'm going to tariff your stuff at 80%, and you bring it down to 10, and then they go, "Thank you, thank you, thank you for inviting me to your party, your dinner party. It was great. You fed me a hamburger at your, billionaire. You fed me a hamburger. That was great. The best hamburger I've ever had." So,
And the billionaire's going, and if you change your tune here, it'll be steak next time. So I think it's a big picture. So when I sold my company, I did not get along right away. I had issues with the new ownership during the sale process. So I knew my role and everything. So I created the sale through a proxy. My partner handled all the talking, and they thought they were working and my partner's making the deals. My partner did not make one deal without my okay. I was majority owner without my okay. So, and my point in saying that is everybody has a role. Bessent understands his role. Trump he knows he's not the best messenger. That's why Bessent's the one making all the rounds. He understands who his proxies are and how to use them. So real quick on China. China's imposed 34%. They've even gone higher, 144 billion in U.S. goods. We talked about this last week. They're purposely targeting our rare earth export to disrupt that. The NVIDIA supply chains, which the computers everybody owns. Now, that's done very strategically. It's up to 125% retaliatory tariff. Bessent thinks he'll buckle. So I threw all that out just to make it China is doomsday right now. They're pushing back. They're saying, my chin, it's not made of glass. It's made of glass. Bessent thinks he'll buckle because he sees their escalation as a losing hand. Because the U.S. imports 5 times more from China than it exports. Here's human nature, people. Here's ugly truth. So their 125% tariffs hurt U.S. farmers, but Trump has known that was coming and is looking at ways to help cover the farmers. But China's export-driven economy risks collapse, forcing Xi to negotiate or face unrest. Here's the human nature. Xi has a stranglehold on the people. But if their economy and everything collapses, there will be a revolt. Xi has killed his enemies. Xi, over the last 15 years, has taken complete control over how the Communist Party is run to change the rules to make him literally the god of China right now. All that goes away if the people don't support him. His enemies will be emboldened. This is what Bessent's counting on. This is what the media is not telling you. This is human nature, people. Prove me wrong, G.
I can't. And actually, China's been in a recession for quite a while. I want to say 2 years. I think the United States has avoided a recession, or at least a real recession, because they've just been hiring at the federal level to mask it. But
Government jobs.
right. So they've been undergoing a lot. Our manufacturing is something, or I believe it's 30% of their exports. So no matter what happens here, if a lot of the companies from here say, you know what, I'm moving my manufacturing over to Vietnam, Bangladesh, and India, that's really bad for China. How are they going to make? They got such a huge population. How do they make up a 30% shortfall when they've been struggling with the 5-10% decline in recent years? Now they're going to face. I don't know how much of that export is of their economy, but a 30% drop in their exports, I'm sure, is somewhere in the neighborhood of another 10% of their economy. That would be really bad for them. So she's going around trying to make deals with everyone else. But again, he's like talking to the millionaires of the party instead of the billionaire. So I
Right.
think he will eventually he'll come to the billionaire and say, you know what, let's talk. And I think Trump needs to be smart enough to know that she cannot show weakness. So he needs to meet him.
The same word, because he's a dictatorship. That's right. G, just real quick, you're right. And for the audience, what G is saying there is real quick is going to the millionaires is going to these other countries, but the billionaire is talking to the millionaires and has more to offer because the billionaire is saying, "Hey, come to my house." Because G doesn't have what the billionaire has to offer. Okay, now the EU's decided to push back too. They came out and said zero tariffs, but that was from February. So they were rehashing that. That's what social media does, screws things up. But the EU's firing back with 20% tariffs on $200 billion on U.S. goods, cars, tech, whiskey. They're targeting swing states like Michigan and Kentucky. We're going to get you where it counts, Donald. I'm like, damn, that's pretty good. They had that precision. French firms like the LVMH, they're halting their U.S. investments, citing market risk. These guys, it's kind of like you and me and having that little 5-year-old thinking, we're going to fight it and I'm going to win. Move along, little man. Move along. I have to do it that side because we're not big guys. Yeah? But so EU wants to pressure Trump via Rust Belt jobs. But Germany's auto sector is bracing for $10 billion in losses. So Bessent thinks this is going nowhere because he views the EU swing state gambit. It's a misfire. U.S. exports to the EU $350 billion in goods like tech, aircraft, soybeans. That's dwarfed by the EU's reliance on U.S. markets for nearly $600 billion in sales. And the EU risks their own jobs. So think German auto workers more than America forcing Berlin to fold or that will force Berlin to fold like they did in 2018. Your thoughts on that? On him saying EU is going to crack too?
No, they will, and like you said earlier, the Rust Belt states, a lot of them are unionized. They kind of face the same problem as the EU does. A lot of the jobs are going to go to the right to work states, right? So that might actually, the Rust Belt would actually gain a lot more jobs. They're going to gain, but they would have gained more if they were right to work as well, but they're not. So the EU is in the same predicament. That whole area is just all unionized. And I think even the UK, which is a fairly socialist country, said, you guys are way too socialist for us. I mean, so that's why they're not the economic powerhouse of the world. So she can go to them and say, hey, let's make some deals, but they just don't have the money. They have money, but not enough. Not enough to replace us.
They were cozying up to China. They built a factory, I forget in what European country. But what was happening is there was a bigger plan where they were looking to take over and run some of the European companies out by China was subsidizing they were doing what they do with solar panels here, subsidizing it to create lower car costs. It was the EVs, and to run that portion of the Europeans out of business, and the Europeans found out. So they don't have China to cozy up because they're like, if I turn around, there's gonna be a knife in my back by China, and they reveal that. So I agree it's gonna fail. I wanted to bring up Kevin O'Leary. Everybody knows Kevin O'Leary. He's the bald-headed guy from Shark Tank. Mark Cuban's probably the most famous, but Kevin
Mr.
O'Leary.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So Kevin O'Leary is 120%. That's not enough. 400%. Because he sees China for what they are. I, as a child, said, they're going to steal our tech. Clinton sold them our missile tech. It's like they don't innovate or create; they steal. Now, because they've caught up to us because of all this stuff, they're starting to build their own brain minds over there. But they've stolen literally everything. Like I said, you can't find a piece of software that's in China where that code is not in a newly created Chinese product because they steal. They steal, and according to Kevin O'Leary, you have no way to fight him in court. They're never going. You have no. So he's like, give him even higher. He sees this for what it is. It's time to make China. What does that say? Come to heel. Bring them to heel. Make them. And we have the leverage, and Trump is doing that. This has been a fight Trump has wanted since 1988 on when Oprah was good, when she was fat Oprah. When he said it there. Your thoughts on O'Leary?
No, he's right. And the guy has built several companies right through Shark Tank, and he always talks about let's move the manufacturing overseas and bring the costs down of the goods. But I'm sure many of those have been duplicated, copied, and sold on Amazon or AliExpress by those same companies that he hired to manufacture his goods. So I'm sure he's jaded by all that. And I think it's overdue to move manufacturing over to countries that we can trust, and China's not one of them. But there are plenty of countries out there that can do this stuff for cheap, and then you can also bring a lot of it back, and then have American workers oversee it with automaton, meaning robots and AI.
Right. So real quick for the audience, negotiations are accelerating. Vietnam, Japan, Thailand, they're leading to have talks by April 11th. And that is today. So I'm assuming they're talking even now. Vietnam's offering 0 tariffs on $12 billion. There's going to be some issues. Japan's like, hey, hold on, we got to talk about rice, you got to talk about rice. And I'm sure you're going to talk about cars too. People say, you're so racist. Shut up. My brother is freaking Japanese, you idiot. So new players join. South Korea and the UK are entering talks. There's some issues there. The South Koreans are saying the Chorus agreements. And, Bessent, it's like, yeah. Bessent expects South Korea to vote on agriculture. He expects the UK steel push. They're pushing something about steel as that's an empty threat because of the U.S. market power. So he sees all these companies buckling, and the reason he sees them as buckling, it's like the New England Patriots of Tom Brady years facing off against G's kids football team. And how old are your kids? 11, 12? It's like, that's the disparity here. India, G's motherland there. They're like trying to put a front up, but they want to negotiate, but they all have their issues. What Trump has to do is what G mentioned. He's got to allow them to save face. I do cringe at times when Trump talks about beating down his enemy and this stuff. I'm like, they have media over there too. You're kind of forcing their leaders into a corner when you do that. And I think that's where Scott Bessent. That's why Scott Bessent is the mouthpiece. So what do you think of everything that's happened in terms of the market bounce? We haven't talked about the market bounce. Gee, when you saw a 2,200 drop, then you saw it shoot back up to the biggest or one of the top 3 days ever in our stock market history. All of a sudden, the Hawley, the Smoot-Hawley people were kind of silent, weren't they?
I mean, my friends are texting me because they, I'm not always right with the stock market, but the day it dropped big, they're like, oh, like, should I sell? I just bought a couple weeks ago. I bought this stock for $560. Should I sell? I'm like, no, don't sell. Just wait for it to bounce right back up and find an exit point there. This is going to be a long decline over the next 6 to 12 months. And then the next day, it jumps back up from 480 to like 525. And I'm like, did you sell? He's like, no, we're back. And it's like, I'm like, you're Mr. Market. You're the manic depressive guy. One day you're depressed, and the next day you're like, it's going to the moon again. And that's how people are. And I'm staying out of the market. I went to cash about 18 months ago, mostly to cash, and I'm just waiting because the market's way overvalued. Even no matter what Trump does or Biden or whoever's in office, it's overvalued. So, so the market action. I just expect this. And again, you watch any YouTube channels of finance gurus, and they say the top 10 biggest up days in the market have all been during bear markets. 1929, 1987, 2000, 2008, 2024, 25.
And that's why there's a saying, don't look at the market. Just go to the beach, go do something because of what G just said. So the White House is touting a 2.4 inflation drop that just came out and a 0.1% price fall in March. But April, right now, we're seeing a 0.5% rise, 5% grocery spike. Now, this is what they're predicting because April has just started and 30%, so all the doomsayers, and it may be true to a degree because there are effects of the market that we're not going to sit there and see. Before I close it out, G, any final comments on all this?
No, I mean, I think it's good to have someone else be the face of this because, like you said, like Trump the other day, like you said, you cringed when he talks about other world leaders. He actually said, him and President Xi of China have a good relationship. They like each other. I mean, this is, I think, 2 days ago.
Right.
Very
That
complimentary.
Exactly. And that's purposely done. He's not doing that out of the kindness of his heart. That's the art of the deal. That is
Right.
the art of the. Read that book, you morons. I'm talking to the TDSers.
Right.
I'm not going to support him by that book. That book can be ignorant fool for the rest of your life. So, as markets reel and nations scramble, Bessent's calculated pause sparks hope for deals, but risks linger. China's doubling down. We do have potential inflation looming. The trade war's next moves are going to shape global economies and America's future. Trump eyes leaving a Reagan-esque legacy. And I'm banking it will work. And I think G is too. And we all should as Americans, because continuing on the path we are on, people, is going to bring an economic cataclysm. You thought Atlantis had it bad. Wait till the stock market really tanks. All right, G, I got a topic. I want to do this final topic. We can do the hot takes another day or later on tonight and tape it for the audience if you want. But we're at an hour and a half. But this is an important topic because I am addressing you TDSers, you Democrats, you mainstream media, you anybody who hates Trump. And it's not that G and I support and love Trump. We don't. Well, maybe his daughter there, she's pretty hot. But outside of that, Trump is just another guy. We look at how he performs, and that's how we judge him. Am I wrong to say that, G?
No, not at all.
Right, I'll tell your wife you're checking his daughter out. So Trump's
I didn't say anything about the daughter.
Trump's tariff tweet, insider trading or noise. Donald Trump on April 9th, 2025 on Truth Social said, quote, "This is a great time to buy," unquote. And it dropped like a match in a dry field. It ignited. Woo! It was on fire. 8 to 12% market blaze just hours before the tariff pause. So Democrats, what's that I smell? That's insider trading. No, that's insider trading you're accustomed to doing. But the White House called it for what it was, just noise. Now Bessent's shadow and Congress's dirty hands are in the mix, meaning people are looking at Bessent and saying you had a hand in this and it's insider trading. So let's unravel this, G. The accusations. Democrats demand an SEC probe after Trump's market-moving post. Senior Democrats led by Chuck Plug Schumer, I call him and bite both plugs, Chuck Plug Schumer, are pushing the SEC to investigate if Donald Trump's post, "This is a great time to buy," hours before the tariff pause, sent stocks soaring and broke security laws. What's your take on that?
So insider trading is acting on secret knowledge that you don't acknowledge. But this was a tweet. I mean, everyone found out about it at the same time. And if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the TDSers and the Democrats on TV for the past, I want to say 3 weeks, have been saying like not even Trump's advisors know what's going on. They get on TV and they don't know what's going on. And no one knows what's going on. And everyone acknowledges Trump is just kind of making decisions willy-nilly on his own. Well, his tariff pause, I think everyone also acknowledges he does that on his own. Like maybe Bessent was involved. I don't know. But he tweeted that hours and hours before. And so everyone found out at the same time. When I woke up, that was the first thing I heard about. So it's not insider trading. I mean, he has the freedom to say whatever he wants. Yeah, there you go. And so,
Exactly.
Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama all made comments about the market during their time. And,
No,
could
G,
say-
you're absolutely correct. And to give you an example, Clinton in 1995 cheered. Markets are resilient after Fed rate hike sparked 100%, 100-point Dow clip. But he calmed the traders with that comment. There was no blowback. That's New York Times, December 20th, 1995. Now, they're saying the timing here also raised flags, G. It came less than 4 hours before his 90-day tariff pause announcement, and that's what triggered the 8 to 12%. Dems call it unconscionable because they're accusing and calling it insider. G already showed you it's not. Past president Reagan in 1987, post-Black Monday, the Dow fell 508 points, said, buy now, will recover. And that boosted the confidence. The White House is pushing back and saying it's partisan noise, claiming Trump's post was reassurance amid media panic. And I think that's kind of what you're saying too, G. I assume you agree with that. Bush, as you said, G pointed out Bush in 2008. He hinted at TARP bailouts on September 24th, and that lifted markets 3%. Of course, like a Bushy, it doesn't lift it much, but 3% was still a big lift. So past presidents, G brought up Obama, 2009, soothed a 300-point Dow clip with markets will stabilize. So as G said, and I'm giving you, what did they call it? What did the young kids say today? I'm bringing you the receipts, people. Bringing you the receipts. Right. I'm not done. FDR, Democrats, God. FDR who jailed the Asians. Yep. FDR who stole the Jews, filled with boats so they wouldn't be sent to Auschwitz. Said no, you can't come to America when they're 20 miles from our port. That FDR. He rallied radio listeners with the classic quote, the only thing to fear is fear itself. That notched stocks up 15%. Then, Gee, what are your thoughts of those who say, well, Bessent's hedge fund, they're the ones who made out like fat rats. Key Square made bank on all this. I looked that up. There's no proof of that. They may have, don't get me wrong, maybe they did. But there's absolutely no proof because all that has to be filed, and none of the filing has happened yet, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that said, G, why would Bessent, I'm assuming he's probably a billionaire because of everything he's done in the past, and Trump was worth $5 billion. Don't you think there's easier ways to kind of like grift money than doing it this way?
Yeah, and again, the market can continue to go down. I mean, again, it's not assured. I mean, I don't agree with Trump saying this is a great time to buy. It's a great time to basically make a little bit of profit and get out because I think we're on a downward slope. But Bessent, he's out of his hedge fund. I mean, it's his old hedge fund, and he exited before he got into office, or not office, but in his position. So, again, it's just noise. It's just TDS. Try to find. I mean, this is the same group of people like Nancy Pelosi made $170,000 a year, and now she's worth $50 million.
$100 million.
$100 million. I mean, if I do 30 years or is it 40 years? Even let's say 40 years. 40 years times 200,000, you're still at 8 million. How do you get to 100 million? Exactly. She knew something along the way.
She was using her good looks and that figure of hers to get some serious speaking gigs.
Hey, I'm feeling a little nauseous. I didn't take my Dramamine, so ease up on the compliments there.
Now, in Nancy Pelosi's defense, in 1980, she was a looker. Yeah. Now you're like, dear God, plastic surgeon, stop! And I'm dead serious. She's got a... Oh my! Just age gracefully, people. Women, age gracefully. Your husband's still gonna love you. So her balloon worth ballooned to 100 million since 2008. Gianforte's in the millions, and they all dodged the 2021 Stock Act ban despite the public rage. That comes from Open Secrets and Forbes. So there's other debts. Elizabeth Warren's net worth hit 12 million by 2024. That was up by 8 million since 2012. Partly from tech stock trades, Open Secrets again. Senator Mark Warner, who dumped his wife I think it's Mark Warner, for his campaign aide there, who's much younger. Yeah, that's love there. His fortune's grown 90 million since 2008 via venture capital bets, both Skirt Insider bans. Any final topics before we close this nonsense out?
My rule of thumb is both sides, both parties do it. Whatever it is, And if you want to talk about insider trading, they both do it. So
Marjorie Taylor Greene. Look, she was smart. I didn't research her, but a story came out how she made out. Yeah, he said it publicly. She has a guy. She has millions where she can invest it. Doesn't matter what the market is, versus us wanting to wait till it gets a bit even lower. And she's going to make a killing. That's her right. But there was no insider trading. You could see the damn market. Any moron could see it. Guys, when BP stock, when that happened, I told my guy, can we buy BP stock? He goes, let's hold off a little. It's going to drop even more. And I think we bought it for like $3 or less than that. And then we sold it a few years later at over $20 a share or something like that. So if
was this after the oil spill?
Of course. I'm like, fossil fuels, baby. I got my lawnmower, I got my car. We still kicking fossil fuels. And that was before EVs were really even. They weren't common, and they weren't very good. But yeah. So so to the audience. So any final comments?
No.
Okay. So Trump's tweet might be loud, people, but Bessent's clean exit from his hedge fund and Congress's fat wallets steal the real spotlight, specifically Congress's fat wallets. And G is correct. Both sides do it. I'm looking at you, Dan Crenshaw Patches. Past presidents have cheered markets without cuffs. So why are they all of a sudden all over Trump? Why? Because they have TDS and they want to. They'd rather see us, we the people, suffer than to help Trump make America great again. So we know why they're attacking Donald Trump. They hate him. This week one's tariff fallout leaves no one wondering. His political enemies think they have the ammunition to attack. They don't realize they're firing blanks faster than the newly snipped vajayjay. And there you have it. Gee, another long show, an hour and 40 minutes. But people, this is important. I truly believe in my heart, nobody's talking the details. And we didn't get into details because G and I aren't those type of analysts that can sit for 2 hours smoking a cigar, drinking whiskey, and talking this stuff without being overwhelmed in the first 5 minutes. We've taken what you need to know and did our best to put it in layman terms. Any final comments there, G?
No, it's the topic of the day, and we spent 2.5 hours last week, an hour and a half this week. It's important, and I don't want people to get sucked into the market, whether you have TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, or not. Look at valuations of what you're buying. That's, in the end, it doesn't matter who's president. The market will go up or down based on valuations.
Exactly. And Nancy, please, no more surgery. Come on, man. Have some dignity. All right,
the returns aren't there for the surgery.
Oh man, I'm an ex-sailor. Not even at 2 a.m, baby. Not even at 2 a.m. All right, all right, people. We hope you enjoy this show. Feel free, if you disagree, let us know in the comments, and I can guarantee you we'll counter with the right answer. And help explain it for you. But again, bookmark grumblingsmedia.com. You'll find all our work there. You'll find all our podcasts there. If you're on YouTube, Rumble, Apple, Spotify, or Pandora, Grumblings Media. I want to sit there and pump up. I keep talking to libertarians, and I apologize. I don't mean to knock on them. We just disagree philosophically. But if you're a libertarian, check out Big John's show. He talks to, he has a show called Liberty Lens with Mike Termott, the vice presidential nominee for their 2024 presidential run. He knows finances too. So give that show if you are libertarian leaning. And until next week, I am William Del Pilar for not G Manghani, but the G-Man. And this is Fired Up. And until next week, have a great, wonderful week and go to the beach. Don't look at your portfolio.
Hey everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these 2 boxes.